In this instalment of Let's Talk Toddlers, we are joined by a special guest, Lise from the Lego Foundation, who is here to help us understand how we can connect with our children through play, but also how we don't need to overcomplicate it.
I think role play is the best way of processing an emotion. When you role play with a little toy, they're kind of experiencing it.
Yeah.
And what that does is develop their emotional toolkit of this is what it will feel like. Play is play, and we need to remember it comes from an imaginary place. It's like looking inside your child's brain and actually being able to see it.
Yeah.
You can see it in their play.
It's almost like their version of a diary.
Yes, that's lovely.
I'm Emma, mum of 3, play researcher and founder of Playful Den. And I'm here with dad of 5, Ben, from The Diary of a Dad.
Hi Emma, great to be here.
And child psychologist Dr. Marta, also a mum.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's talk toddlers. Lise, welcome.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So this developmental stage is obviously fraught with big emotions, big feelings from our little people. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is the impact that play can have on those in kind of helping them to like work through things, or even using it at certain times in the day to kind of calm them or soothe them or burn off energy, that sort of thing. And I wondered if you guys had any experiences or examples of where perhaps you'd use some like role play to help kids with those feelings and emotions. Do you want to kick off, Marta?
I can do, yeah. I mean, I think role play is the best way of kind of doing that, which is processing an emotion. So either before an event or following an event that has brought up a lot of emotion for your child. I think it's the best way because they get to re-experience it, but in a really safe place. And as an adult, you can help walk them through alternatives or be curious about their experience. And when a child does it through play, like maybe they're using the Duplo characters, what they do is separate themselves, you know, like it's happening to this little character or it's happening to my teddy, not me.
Yeah.
But they're still going through the experience. So it's really good for preparing for things like a change. So I often talk about it around if there's a new sibling coming along. It's a great thing to do with like little dolls and little teddies and things to kind of prepare your child through role play, like what it will be like to have a baby, and even like act it out that the baby's just going to go, wah! Like all the time, and what is that going to sound like for your little one? Going to the doctor, going to the dentist, taking medication. When you role play that with a little toy and you go through the motions and you use your words and your child sees it, they're kind of experiencing it.
Yeah.
And what that does is like develop their emotional toolkit of this is what it will feel like, which often shrinks anxiety in the moment as well because they've kind of been through it already in their imagination.
It's helping sort of remove their uncertainty of things or giving them a little bit of control back for a situation where they might not have that much control, right? You can play it out. You can be the narrator. What happens then? What happens then? And giving back some control that they didn't have in a situation. That's really also, I think, key in how you can play through situations or something that's already happened and they want to talk about.
And I think you called it the safe space there, Marta, which I think is so key. And for parents, when you're engaging in role play, not to like freak out about what comes up in role play, because actually if it's coming out in play, that's a really good thing. I remember in the pandemic, there was a lot of children who were sort of putting masks on their teddies and maybe like acting out, washing their hands. And a lot of parents would be really concerned that it was like a sign of them sort of like traumatized. But actually the fact that they're bringing that into the play shows that they're processing, they're making sense of it. And that's what we want. So I think there's no right or wrongs in play. It's like when a story comes into role play, to try not to almost like manipulate it or correct it to be sort of perfect. Even if it's like my daughter always loved to play, for ages she played it, the new girl at school, because she had to move settings. And there were all these different scenarios that came up. Sometimes like someone would be mean to her. And obviously as a parent, you want to sort of swoop in and be like, you know, that's not going to happen, or you don't have to worry about that. But you just play through it. Like it is that portal. It's that safe space to try on these different identities and these
building
different
skills, right? When she was playing that, it's building her capacity of being like confident in that moment. How would I act? Who do I talk to? What do I do? It's so important. They're processing experiencing something.
And also imagining what could happen,
Yeah.
what if, and what's
What if,
happening,
yeah.
and trying to come up with solutions for different scenarios. So it's quite creative as well.
Yeah,
I
very.
think sometimes as well that kids, when they are engaged in role play, they figure things out, and it almost makes more sense to them in that setting than you just telling them.
Yes.
One of you mentioned the new baby sort of coming into the family, and in our house, I remember trying to get children to be quiet when they're playing whilst the baby's trying to nap. It feels like a constant conversation. Shh, shh, shh. Yeah, what's really interesting is watching, particularly my older three, when they are role playing, and the younger ones are getting involved in this now, where they've got a doll or their baby, and they're telling their siblings to be quiet because the baby's sleeping. So in that moment, while they're playing that game, it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
And then I'll say to them, oh, what was that you were saying? Do you remember? That's why we're always telling you, when we've got Zaya upstairs, you guys need to. And, it's really nice just to see how children are, I guess, emotionally developing and also figuring things out, just through something as simple as role play.
Yeah, so interesting. And at this age group, their play, because their worlds are quite small, their play world tend to be about the things that are within that sort of small world. So they'll bring in, there'll be the park, the sort of nursery, animals that they know. So they're sort of really, really putting into that sort of mixing pool, things that they've seen, observed, they're thinking about that might be coming, and it's all kind of in that kind of play experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made a really important point before, Emma, about, as a parent, whatever you're watching in your child's play, one, let it be allowed, make it the safe space that I was mentioning before, but also it's not a trauma. So I think, like, for example, with my little one, since the Queen has died, there were so many conversations about death, and she's not at an age where death is something she understands. There's no permanence to death for her. She doesn't understand it. Like, she still talks about it. And there was so much death in her games with her little people. And like, she would role play that idea of somebody dying and then imagining what would happen to everybody else. So suddenly all her dollies were like, like lots of crying dolls. And I was like, what's happening here? But she's not traumatized. She's trying to figure it out. And I think that's so key when we observe our child's play, that play is play, and we need to remember it comes from an imaginary place. And yes, they might be role playing real life things, but that's not necessarily a trauma. It's part of their like inner world, if you like. It's like, I always think of it that way. It's like looking inside your child's brain and actually being able to see it.
Yeah.
You can see it in their play.
It's almost like their version of a diary.
Yes, that's lovely.
But I think what you also touched on here is there's no wrong emotions. I think that's really critical in the play. You can be angry, you can be mad, you can be sad, you can be excited, you can be everything. It's all right. Like, there's no emotions that's an ugly or a wrong emotion.
Yeah.
I think that's
100%.
really, really critical, as well as the parent, to be able to allow those emotions, especially in play, because they're really harmless in play, but they're also there. And
One of the reasons why I hate the expression play nicely.
Oh, me too.
Because it's like, again, it's quite an adult interpretation of play, that it's only about these kind of very
Nice
joyful, sort of sugary kind of feelings. And actually, that for a lot of children, they're seeing all sorts of things around them, and they've got all of this breadth of feelings, as you described, Lisa, that they're bringing into their play. So again, it's just not to be, just freaked out by that. Just allow it to sort of be in that sort of that diary, that mixing pot that they're bringing it
Toddlers
into.
have messy emotions.
Yes.
Releasing it through play is really healthy. It's good. If you only see like happy-go-lucky emotions in play, then like, what's going on there? You want them to release it through the play, because then when they switch off the play, they don't need that release anymore. It's gone out.
Have you got any examples of that, Ben, or recall any?
Yeah, I think I sometimes just, what I like doing sometimes is just listening and not jumping in, not getting involved, just listening to the conversation. As I say, it's often sort of between siblings, but even our 2-year-old, I just listen to him sometimes, and he'll be talking about, one of his toys looking sad, or, one being happy. And again, I mean, it still shocks me, that he's only 2 and, kind of understands. And he's not just, these aren't just words that he's plucking from the air. He understands what those emotions mean. And then he also translates that then into, our real life conversations, because he'll be telling me, oh, I was so happy because, that was just a really nice day that he's had. And I think, again, you just seeing that, as we've said all throughout, that this is really just such a key developmental stage in their life. And it's just fascinating to just sit back and watch it unfolding literally right in front of you.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that age where they narrate, it is so lovely to just tune into that and hear what they're like. It's almost like a replay of what's stuck with them or what's on their minds. And just if you get those little opportunities where they don't quite see you, so they're not like, come over here, and you can just listen to that little play chatter.
And even just the imagination running wild, because again, my 2-year-old, the recent phrase this week has been that his tooth has been wobbling and that he went to the dentist, and he obviously hasn't.
I love it.
He's and to be fair, that never even. I mean, the older kids have been to the dentist, but he wasn't there. So I don't know if he maybe heard something or saw something on a TV program or whatever. But he's telling you, if you came into our house and he told you that, you would believe that it was a fact, that that's what he's done. So again, his imagination's just running wild. And I'll say to him, "Oh, what was the dentist like?" And he was like, "Yeah, he was fine. He was nice." So it's, again, we've got to just embrace those things.
I think we forget as well how new things are to kids. So for us, obviously, we know what a dentist is. Yeah. We've all been many, many times. But for a little child, they've got no concept of a dentist. And then suddenly they've learnt this idea that there's someone who opens your mouth and looks at your teeth. Like, that is a lot to process when you've come from no information about that. Lisa, do you have any tips or suggestions for parents that perhaps want to engage a little more in role play with their children, for how to do that?
Well, I was just reminded when you were talking about also the dentist example of, they don't have a concept of what it means to go to the dentist. It's the same if you're going to the hospital for a checkup, if something's wrong with you. And I think, if you have a child that's going to the hospital for a routine checkup or for something, it really helps to play it out before. What's going to happen? What can you expect to sort of experience? Who'll be in the room? What's going to happen? Mm-hmm. But, to start with, not making it too scary, you probably show the kid that there is a teddy bear that's going to the doctor's place, and they'll look at or listen to your heart, and you play it out, and then you can visualize how the room is, and you can build that with Lego Duplo. You can draw it, you can play it out, and then as the kid goes through that experience themselves and come home, maybe they want to sort of replay that experience to gain sort of understanding of what happens and get some control back that they may have lost during that situation. So I think in that way, it really helps the kid to process, understand, make sense of, and be less and less scary.
And often that's the kind of thing that you can be really specific with your child. If you're going to do that kind of a role play, which is a preparation role play, I always say to parents, get concrete. Explain like exactly kind of what you said. There's going to be a doctor in the room, might be a lady doctor, might be a man doctor. They're going to have this funny little wire, and they're going to maybe put it on your back or put it on your heart. But you can also say, maybe they'll measure your height, or maybe they'll weigh you, those kind of things. Because then your child will have a sense of these things that are going to happen, and you can play it out. But also when you're there on the day, if you have mentioned something like they're going to measure your height and then they don't, you can say to the doctor, "Hey, have you got one of those things where you can measure my child's height? Could we do that?" Most doctors, because I work with doctors, would say, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine." And your child then goes, "Oh my God, that thing we played, I'm now experiencing it." And that can be really nice. And I would go for something like that, weight or height, which they often will look at in little ones, particularly the weight one. But I would do something like that with your child, because it kind of brings that kind of grounding of something that they played with you, and they can trust this is something that then does happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think one of the best things about Duplo sets like this, or any kind of concrete play that you do with a toy, is that you can make it literal, and you can help your child have that visualization of this is what's going to happen. And that can be so comforting to a child.
And then as you go home, you talk about your kid and what was the most fun, what was the part that you didn't like, if there were any parts that you didn't like, and then if you're playing it out, you can sort of, how could we help this person that was experiencing what you experienced? And then in that way, you're also growing their vocabulary around sort of emotions and how to comfort someone else, or depending on their age, maybe it's not relevant for a 1.5-year-old, but definitely for a 3-year-old, that would make sense.
Mm-hmm. One of the times that we used Duplo sets was when my son was starting nursery, and he was obviously quite anxious about the drop-off. So we used to use the Duplo sets to build nursery, and then use the little figures to be his classmates, and then we'd have the nursery teachers, and then we would role play the drop-off at nursery. And it was so helpful, and just him helping to build the nursery, and then which one of these animals is your teacher, and his little classmates. And that was just really a really, really helpful way to sort of support him through that time of starting nursery, and was just a really fun game that we sort of made up and used to do as a little ritual together.
For me, they're also communicating all the time with play. Like when a child says, come and play with me, as adults we hear, come and play. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, hey, I have something to tell you, or I want to show you something, or something happened the other day that I didn't understand. So if I play it out, will you help me make sense of it? But children don't say that. They don't say, can we sit on the sofa and have a chat? That's not what they do. They say, let's play. And they're trying to communicate something really important. And you can see it if you observe like a little one, a toddler, like in play. You sometimes hear them use your words. Like you can hear adult language, which I always find hilarious. But when you do, it's often that they're trying to make sense of a conversation, or something they've heard on TV, or whatever it is, or something that they've heard with their peers. So I think often during play, if you witness your child doing it, especially toddlers, they'll use your adult words. And sometimes they're trying to make sense of language. So something you've said that they don't understand, so they use it and try and figure out context. But it's also a way of like developing social skills. They do that best through play. So role play, or even like with Duplo sets, the little figures, they're so good for doing that kind of like conversational interaction. They find it so much easier than doing it with us.
Ben, what do you think about finding time for play? Because I think when we speak about children's play, I think this is such an important part of the conversation, because a lot of us are living quite busy lives. There can be a lot going on in a family schedule. What kind of things do you do to sort of preserve space for play, or how does it happen in your home?
For us, there is maybe a bit more of a structure. You know, I think about, and again, just in the context of toddlers as we are at the moment, I think about my 2-year-old, and if there are certain times during the week, during the day, where we can, you know, drop what we're doing and can just play with him. And then there's other times where maybe it's sort of more the weekends where, you know, there isn't a set structure, and it's a time where we could put our phones or our laptops to one side and then just engage in doing what we can. But I think something that I've really been working on over the last, I'd say maybe, you know, the last year, is just trying to let go of my expectations of what play is. Yes, there are times when I know, okay, this is going to be me going off with a child or a couple of children and playing a game. But actually, there'll just be other times where if we've just got to freestyle it and just let it happen with no expectations.
A huge thank you to today's guests, and of course, all our listeners. This is Let's Talk Toddlers, created by Lego Duplo.